Hello everybody, it's Rod Sager with the Photo Fair, here to talk to you today about another vintage camera, one of my favorites. This one today, the Canon 7 and 7S rangefinder models, the last of the Canon rangefinders and really the representation of the end of the rangefinder era as far as being the mainstream professional and serious amateur cameras. The SLRs kind of took over in the 1970s. So, great camera. The 7 and 7S models are basically very similar. The difference between the 7S, they added an accessory shoe up here on the top, and they got away from the selenium cell solar meter and went to a battery-powered CDS cell for the light meter. So I don't even use the light meter in these cameras, so it doesn't matter to me which one I use. I have both a 7 and a 7S, and I am selling my 7 currently for sale on eBay, and I'll be bringing it to the Photo Fair show November 18th in Newark, California. So a little capitalism break there. But anyway, great cameras. So I want to take a moment here and show you the regular 7 camera here. Cool things that you get about with the 7 is you get a nice big bright viewfinder. Okay, it's easy to look through it. It's as big as any SLR viewfinder. It's got a 0.8x magnification, which is not quite as strong as a Leica M3, which has 0.91, but this camera has a 35mm bright line frame line, whereas the Leica M3 only has a 50. So if you use wide angle lens 35, which is one of my favorites for this kind of camera, you have to either get a special Leica lens with the goggles, they call them, which optically gives you a wide angle view, or you have to use a accessory finder up top. I hate accessory finders. So anyway, I think that's an advantage to the Canon 7. The Canon 7, all the models of the 7 are single stroke models. So when you advance the film, you just one stroke and it gives you the full frame. You can multi-stroke them if you want to, like if you're trying to keep the camera up to your face and you want to advance it without having your thumb poke your eyeball out, you can still do that, even though it will advance in one fell swoop. So swingback on this camera, a lot of those Leica purists don't like the swingback, right? Now this is how most cameras actually loaded from the 1960s right on up into the modern era. And they were prone to having light leaks because you have this whole seam all the way around here where you've got to be light tight. Some of them used foam and that sort of thing. This one doesn't actually use foam. This one just uses the double ridge line here where the this little seam right here is seamed on both sides. So it light traps it by having 3 angles. Light doesn't bounce off 3 surfaces very well, especially when they're black. So I've never had light fogging issues ever with any Canon 7, and I've owned a bunch of them over the years. So that whole deal with the swingback really doesn't, I think, apply on the 7 as much. But you'll definitely have less light leaks with a Leica M3 in theory. But what you get is this nice, easy, wide open back here where you can put your film in, put it in the spool, and advance it, and you're not sitting there trying to feed it underneath the steel frame like you do with a Leica or with those early Leicas and early Canons where you had to kind of shove it in there and feed it through the bottom seam there. I never did care for that much. So the 7 works much more like a traditional modern either SLR or modern film camera for 35mm. Camera's going to give you speeds from 1 second all the way up to 1/1000th of a second. Of course, this is all mechanical camera. You also get bulb. You've got the controls right here for setting your frame lines, 50, 135, 35, so on. You get beautiful bright line finder, beautiful viewfinder in this camera. Some of the older ones, they might have some fog in them or some, fungus, or maybe it's just a little dusty in there. So, you may have to get the camera cleaned up if you find one that's not bright. When they're cleaned up, like my Canon 7S is, they are bright and crisp and beautiful viewfinders. Among the best rangefinder viewfinders you'll ever find. So, again, if you find one and it's a little dusty in there, a little hazy, that can usually be cleaned up. So I kind of like that. The Canon 7 is often kind of derided a little bit for being big. It's a little bigger than an M3. But I got to tell you, for me, it's fine. I have, you know, fairly reasonable sized hands here, and it fits really nice in my hand. I really like the way my finger sits on the shutter button. It's big enough that it gets it away from my eye, so I can advance it without poking myself in the eye. It's only a little bigger than a Leica M3. It's just not as pretty as a Leica M3. You know, Leica M3 is a piece of work. This one's more of a utilitarian design, but it works extremely well. And I will say that the pictures I've made with this camera are fantastic. So the Canon 7 is going to rewind like any normal old school 35mm camera. You're going to switch this little lever across here. It's not a lever, rather. It's a ring around here, and you go from the A position to the R position, and then you simply hand crank it back until you feel the leader come off the spool, just like you would with any old school 35mm camera. The light meter in the original 7, like this one, is a selenium cell. It's up here. Mine still has some sensitivity, but I doubt that it's accurate at all. So don't expect the selenium cell that's 50, 60 years old to still work, or at all for that matter. But the later models, like the 7S, had a cadmium cell meter, and it took a battery, which goes down in the bottom here. That's one of those mercury batteries, 1.35 volt. So you got two choices there. You either get a modern alkaline battery, which the voltage is slightly off and will make the meter read a little bit too strong. Still usable, you can compensate. Or you can buy a modern, I think it's a zinc oxide battery or something. They're kind of expensive and they don't last very long, but it gives you the proper 1.35 volts if you want to use the meter and have it be spot on. But the meter in this camera still works. It still works great, you know, after 50, 60 years. So I like that. But I generally don't use the meter anyhow, so it's not a big deal for me. I shot with this 7 for a long time without using the light meter. So, you know, it's up to you. If you want to have a built-in light meter and use the light meter, I would go to a 7S. You pay $100 more for it, but you'll get a meter that is serviceable and very likely still works, you know, as opposed to these selenium cells, which almost never work. So, anyway, enough on that. So, this camera uses the world-famous Leica 39mm thread mount. Leica was unable to patent a thread mount, so it's just it's a standard universal thread that's been around for, you know, a long, long time outside of the photo industry. So that's why virtually any camera maker was able to utilize that thread mount. And although we call it Leica thread mount, it's really not a Leica design per se. It's just a thread mount that they chose to use back in the 1920s when they first started making rangefinders. So this has access to all of those lenses, whether they're from Lights or whether they're from Zeiss or whether they're from Canon. Even Nikon made some lenses for universal mount back in the day before they adopted the Nikon mount that's shared with Contax. And you have plenty of lenses, even some modern lenses that can be used on this camera as well. You know, like the Voigtlander 15mm lens can be used on this camera. Super wide, and even there's even a Voigtlander wider net. I think they got a 12 and a 10 full frame, you know, film lenses. So they work on this camera. Any thread mount lens going to work on this camera. So like a 39mm. So that's kind of cool. Some great Canon lenses out there. If you want to stick with the Canon lenses, they made a lot of lenses. They were probably the biggest competitor to Leica for rangefinder glass, and so they're fantastic that way. So anyhow, Canon 7 is a top pick. I love this camera. You can't go wrong. It is the best value. The M3s still fetch $700-800 for the body in okay condition. You know, and whereas these, you know, a couple $100, and you're getting a camera that, quite frankly, with the exception of the pure aesthetics, the Leica is definitely prettier, and the fit and finish on the Leica is probably just a little bit better. But other than that, it's in many ways a better camera, and you can pick it up for chump change. You go out there rolling like a 1960s Boss with your rangefinder camera and a couple lenses and just have a good time with it. So highly recommend the Canon 7. and we'll see you at the Photo Fair on November 18th. Appreciate you watching, and get out there, go to the photo shows, and just take a look at some of these cameras. It's so much fun to use these things. We'll see you next time.